At Joint Base Andrews this morning, J.D. Vance walked across the tarmac, stopped at the microphones, and said something that will either be remembered as the opening line of a historic peace deal or the last optimistic sentence before the bombs fell again. We're looking forward to the negotiation. I think it's going to be positive. Then he boarded Air Force Two and flew toward Islamabad. He is expected to be joined by Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner. Iran is expected to send Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi and Parliamentary Speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf.
We have breaking news right now. President Trump has just given an interview to the New York Post, and here's exactly what he says in part of that interview. We are loading up the ships with the best ammunition, the best weapons ever made, even better than what we did previously, and we blew them apart. Now, all of this is activity remains constrained in that critical oil ship flow and waterway. The ships are waiting to get in. We've only seen maybe 3 of them with oil in them. Other ships have made it through up to about 11 or 12. But usually we see between 120 and 150 going through the Strait of Hormuz. Countries are perched to see what will happen next. And you heard from President Trump. He's more than perched. He didn't pull anybody out of that region. This is a ceasefire in the war. This is not a complete deal. We know that J.D. Vance, our vice president, is on his way to Islamabad, Pakistan, to go meet with those who will sit at the table and make a deal happen potentially. But President Trump is issuing that stern warning to the regime at this point. Here's also what he has put up on Truth Social. In part, there are reports that Iran is charging fees to tankers going through the Hormuz Strait. They better not be, and if they are, they better stop now, exclamation point. However, Iran's supreme leader is pushing back. Well, you know, the son, Muqtada, who nobody's actually ever verified if he's alive and if he's moving around and all that, since his relatives were all killed, including his Ayatollah father. But anyway, he's quoted to have said, "We are entering a new era with the management of the Strait of Hormuz. We did not and do not seek war. But we will not give up our rightful rights in any way, and for this we consider all the fronts of resistance as one." I wonder what he means by that, all the fronts. He's hitting his neighbors, so he doesn't have any friends. Meanwhile, Vice President Vance is expressing optimism ahead of tomorrow's talks.
Looking forward to the negotiation. I think it's going to be positive. We'll, of course, see, as the President of the United States said, if the Iranians are willing to negotiate in good faith, we're certainly willing to extend the open hand. If they're going to try to play us, then they're going to find that the negotiating team is not that receptive. So we're going to try to have a positive negotiation. The President has gave us some pretty clear guidelines, and we're going to see.
Joy Jones, warrior on the couch here. The nature of this war is that we're in a 3-day-old ceasefire that doesn't look very ceasefire-y on the Iran side.
No, and this probably was expected. I think this more than anything, there's a thing called tyranny of distance when it comes to planning war. And so the further you are away from your resupply, your beans and bullets and all of that, the harder a sustained effort is. And then you start this war, you're ahead of schedule, and then you realize, okay, all these contingencies for resupply, stopping the fuel, those are falling apart because of European countries afraid to be involved. Okay, now we need to reorient our compass and plan for this. I think it was the Ford we've lost already. So some of these assets that were there in the buildup are leaving. New troops are coming in. I don't think we've seen the end of the bombing campaign. Hopefully we've seen the end of what we call war. We've seen the end of our folks being in tremendous amount of harm's way. But at the end of the day, I mean, go back as far as you want. It's much easier to defend territory than it is to take it. It's much easier to Vietnam, Afghanistan, just in our lifetime. It's just much easier. It's much harder to eliminate threats in Iran than it would be if Iran were trying to attack somewhere else. When you have the defensive position, you don't have to expend all your ammo. You don't have to have more people. And so people talk about, oh, they shot down one of our planes. I thought that we had air superiority. Well, we do, because they're not flying planes. They're not bombing us. What we don't have is the ability to not know that they can do what the Mujahideen did to the Russians. They took cheap shoulder-fired rockets and took enough MiGs and helicopters down that the Russians said, hey, this costs more money than we want to spend on it. We're going to back on out of here.
That is such a great example, too. And just think of how much kinetic activity had happened in Afghanistan, for instance, before we even got involved, right? And they had faced so much, and still we couldn't do it.
And I think what we're seeing right now is that you can't just military your way to a victory. And we've seen over the last 40 years, you can't just diplomacy your way to a victory. It's up to President Trump and his team to learn how to use those two levers together to get to what they consider a victory. And as was outlined a week into the war, the victory was supposed to be, the goals were destroy their Navy, destroy their Air Force, destroy their ability to produce and fire missiles, and take away their ability to go nuclear. So as far as I'm concerned, those are still the four elements of victory. The Strait of Hormuz is not in there.
No, but it's become something that, Rebecca, obviously Iran knows it can use that leverage because why?
Right.
Why? Because they're right there. Actually, the waterway doesn't belong to them. It's along their country.
No, it's international. It belongs to all of us and belongs to nobody specifically. And so it's intolerable for the United States' perspective that Iran is going to claim that it can control the Strait of Hormuz. And remember, if Iran is controlling the Strait of Hormuz, that means China is, because China is the biggest backer and gets 90% of Iranian oil goes to China. The other thing I think it's really important, what Joey said is, I think all of this negotiation right now, Vice President Vance going to Pakistan, all he really needs to consider this a success, I think, is to get them to say they're not going to fire into the strait. That's the immediate problem. And I think we're going to then see an international force there escort some oil through the strait.
NATO will get involved?
I think they're going to see Europe. I think the Europeans are willing to do it if there's not open hostilities. And so they need to have the confidence that they can do that. And maybe if it's just temporary, get some oil through there. But we're still going to have all these other problems with this rump regime that exists. And then I think Epic Fury resumes in a few weeks, even if we do get some successful, safe travel through the strait.
But I don't understand, Kayleigh, how Europe can sit by and not let us use the airspace and the things that a U.S. military, should we have to re-engage and just protect the strait so that ships can go through. I mean, but they want to benefit from that protection in the strait. So they might take a part via NATO, and Ruta was just here, and so maybe those conversations are happening, the Secretary General of NATO. But they don't want to support what got us to the point where we could keep them from developing nukes.
It's absolutely absurd, and that's why cameras weren't allowed in that room. Rutte and Trump do get along. Typically, there are cameras there, and we see this relationship, but we didn't see it because a hard conversation took place. And I've been in the room with President Trump as he's met with foreign countries and had those hard conversations, and believe me, they look very differently behind the scenes than they look like in front of the cameras, and that's where he gets his leverage. International diplomacy is messy. It's not going to be a clean process. There's a back and forth that takes place, and an added element when you're dealing with a terrorist regime like Iran that cannot be trusted. But I will say this, the negotiators in the room, I've been there with Jared Kushner. He knows what he's doing. He's whip smart. Steve Witkoff, they are responsible for the hostages being released, the Gaza ceasefire. J.D. Vance is a key voice in this. And ultimately, President Trump, the closer who has solved 8 conflicts. This is a hard problem to solve. It has bedeviled every president over the last 47 years. But I like the odds with this president.
Well, and like Joey said, they're using the 2 levers. They've got the diplomacy, and you know we will use our might. So, Emily, one more point about all this is Israel and its continued battle with Lebanon's terrorist army that sits there. And now the Lebanese want to talk about dismantling that army. I don't know if they can, but that's a sticking point. Iran says Hezbollah has to be able to do what it needs to do against Israel. So that's a war, I guess, that just continues.
Well, I think that underscores that different sovereign entities have different mission objectives, and they have different purposes that they're seeking. If I can just ask you a follow-up real quick. For those that are saying, who are we even negotiating with in Iran or in the Islamic Republic? And secondly, how does that impact all of the proxies that were the source of so much death and destruction? Is it our Gulf allies that we can rely upon to help manage?
Well, I think that this is a great question, Emily. And one of the things that the U.S. destroyed is command and control. It's the ability of the leaders to be able to communicate to the people in the field. And so that is a problem. And President Trump has said as much. But we do need to get whoever is going to be talking to J.D. Vance needs to say, we are going to call off attacks. There will be no attacks in the Strait of Hormuz. But it is a rump regime. We've taken out over 1,000 IRGC and besieged leaders. So we really have taken out the top leadership in the regime. It's really just a rump regime flailing at this point.
Well, look, last hour we heard with a statement directly from the White House during the Faulkner Focus who would be sitting at the table on our side, Witkoff, Kushner, and Vice President Vance. We still, as your point, we don't know who's on the other side of the table. This is breaking just now from the President of the United States on Truth Social. Quote, the Iranians don't seem to realize they have no cards other than a short-term extortion of the world by using international waterways. The only reason they are alive today is to negotiate. Quick response to that, Kayleigh.
Yeah, he's clearly showing that he is willing to use hard power. And that is what makes this president different. You look at Joe Biden before him, soft power. What Iran saw was an unfortunate withdrawal from Afghanistan that was disastrous. What they see when they look at this president is someone who's saying hard power is not off the table here. I'm willing to use it, and I'm using it for leverage now.
And as you pointed out, we're reinforcing that by pulling out what we need and putting back what we need. So, yeah, we haven't left.
Yeah, I don't see anything saying that we're not going to continue epic fury.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.
Ghalibaf has already set preconditions. A ceasefire in Lebanon and the release of Iran's blocked assets must occur before negotiations begin. The U.S. position. Lebanon isn't part of the deal. Iran's assets aren't being unfrozen, so the vice president is flying to a negotiation where the other side says it won't negotiate until conditions are met that the U.S. has already refused, and the president has given them 24 hours. Trump told the New York Post, "You're dealing against people that we don't know whether or not they tell the truth. To our face, they're getting rid of all nuclear weapons, everything's gone. And then they go out to the press and say, no, we'd like to enrich." That is the president's own assessment of the people his vice president is about to sit across from. Two sets of ships matter today, the ones being loaded with ammunition, and the ones that aren't moving through the strait. Trump told the New York Post, "We are loading up the ships with the best ammunition, the best weapons ever made, even better than what we did previously, and we blew them apart." This is not ambiguous. The President of the United States is publicly describing the rearming of warships during a ceasefire. He is telling the world on the record that if tomorrow's talks fail, the bombing resumes, bigger and better and stronger than anyone has ever seen before. Meanwhile, the Strait of Hormuz remains a trickle. The Fox segment cited 11 or 12 ships total, only about 3 carrying oil. Normal daily traffic, 120-150. Harris Faulkner's number still holds, 180 loaded tankers waiting outside the strait. Over 170 million barrels of oil and refined products, sitting idle, thousands of seafarers aboard them. The world economy hanging on whether a few more ships get permission from the IRGC to transit Iran's coastline. Trump posted on Truth Social that reports of Iran charging tolls for strait passage were unacceptable. They better not be, and if they are, they better stop now. Iran's new supreme leader is quoted as saying, "We are entering a new era with the management of the Strait of Hormuz." Management is a word that does a lot of work. It means control. It means tolls. It means Iran decides who passes. Pakistan has deployed approximately 10,000 security personnel in Islamabad for the talks, declared a 2-day holiday, and locked down the city. The stakes are not lost on the hosts. Analysts warn that Pakistan could be pulled into conflict with Iran because of its mutual defense pact with Saudi Arabia, potentially igniting multiple borders already strained by tensions with India and Afghanistan. Pakistan's leverage comes from a unique position. It shares a long border and cultural and religious ties with Iran, is home to the largest population of Shia Muslims outside of Iran, does not host any U.S. military bases, and has not been targeted by Iranian missiles and drones. It is, quite literally, the only country on Earth that both sides will still talk to. Field Marshal Asim Munir, whom Trump has publicly praised and who brokered the ceasefire call that stopped the civilizational threat at 7:59 p.m. on April 7th, is described as Pakistan's most powerful figure. His role in these talks may matter more than anyone sitting at the formal table. The Faulkner Focus segment produced 3 genuinely valuable analytical moments, all from guests rather than hosts. Joey Jones, the Marine veteran and Fox contributor, said the single most important thing anyone has said on this network about this war's trajectory. You can't just military your way to a victory. And we've seen over the last 44 years, you can't just diplomacy your way to victory. He also noted that the Strait of Hormuz was never part of the original war objectives. It became the central issue only because Iran made it one. This is a critical point the administration has never fully reckoned with. The war created the Strait crisis, not the other way around. Rebecca Heinrichs, the defense analyst, offered the most sober assessment of what's possible in Islamabad. The best realistic outcome is getting Iran to stop firing into the strait and allowing an international force to escort tankers. Not a grand deal, not denuclearization, not regime change, just enough to get oil moving. She also said bluntly, it is a rump regime. We've taken out over 1,000 IRGC leaders. It's really just a regime flailing at this point. If that's true, the question becomes, can a flailing regime make a deal that sticks? Kayleigh McEnany offered something useful by identifying the administration's actual leverage points through Trump's all-caps Truth Social language. No nuclear weapons, open and safe strait, America is back, real agreement. Those 4 phrases she suggested are the non-negotiable floor. No one mentioned the 112 killed in Lebanon on the ceasefire's first day. No one mentioned the continuing strikes on Beirut. No one mentioned that the IRGC claims it has not launched any projectiles since the ceasefire began, a claim that, if true, means the post-ceasefire attacks on Gulf states and Israel that were reported may have come from proxy groups operating independently or from pre-programmed systems. That distinction matters enormously for the negotiations. No one mentioned that Trump has acknowledged he and Vance are philosophically a little bit different on the Iran war. Remarkable admission that the man leading the peace talks may not fully share the president's approach to the conflict those talks are supposed to resolve, and no one mentioned the cost. 42 days in, thousands dead across the region, 13 American service members killed, 348 wounded, gas above $4, diesel above $5, NATO fractured. An F-15 shot down and its crew rescued in the most dangerous extraction since Mogadishu. Universities and synagogues bombed. Human chains of women and children around power plants. A civilization threatened with annihilation by the leader of the free world. Those are the stakes walking into Islamabad tomorrow. Not talking points, not leverage. Lives. What tomorrow looks like. Trump said the U.S. will find out in about 24 hours whether the talks succeed. Another deadline. Another clock. If the talks produce something, even a framework, even a commitment to keep the strait partially open during a 45-day extended negotiation, markets will rally, oil will drop, and the administration will declare a historic achievement. If they don't, the ammunition is loaded, the ships are in position, and the president has already told the world in his own words that Iran's leaders are only alive today to negotiate. Vance landed in Islamabad with what Trump calls clear guidelines and what everyone else calls the most consequential diplomatic mission of the 21st century. The ceasefire framework calls for Phase 2 discussions over a period of 45 days, a broader regional de-escalation, and talks channeled through Pakistan initially, then finalized in Islamabad. That's the roadmap. Whether anyone follows it starts tomorrow. One last detail. Iran's IRGC issued a statement Friday saying that if it strikes any target, it will courageously announce it in an official statement. That language, courageously, is addressed as much to hardliners inside Iran who want to keep fighting as it is to Washington. The IRGC is telling its own people, we haven't surrendered. We're choosing this pause, and we can end it whenever we want. Both sides have their hands on the trigger. Both claim the other has no cards. And tomorrow, in a locked-down city in Pakistan, they will sit across from each other for the first time and find out if there is anything left between war and peace that both can live with. The world, exhausted, frightened, and running low on fuel, is waiting to find out too.